CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe. Live from CGTN in London, I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories. Why is the EU's COVID vaccine rollout lagging behind? European lawmakers quiz Big Pharma's bosses.
And EU leaders try to discourage countries from easing lockdown restrictions too early.
China celebrates lifting millions out of absolute poverty.
When are we all going on a summer holiday? The CEO of Thomas Cook hopes it may be in just a few months' time.
European Union lawmakers are discussing how to accelerate the COVID vaccine rollout after the EU was criticised for lagging behind the US and the UK. Right now, they're grilling the bosses of the big vaccine firms, including Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Moderna. Well, our correspondent Andrew Wilson's been following events. Hello there, Andrew. What are the lawmakers looking for from the vaccine companies?
Well, I think, Julia, what they're looking for is reassurance to try and give them the confidence to see if they can't improve the disastrous vaccination programme that seems to be afflicting most countries within the European Union at the moment. They've assembled the best of the best. They've got all the CEOs together from AstraZeneca and Moderna, CureVac and Johnson & Johnson, all of whom have pledged their enthusiasm to push up production rates as soon as possible, to get as many doses out to those that need them as soon as possible, and are all sounding very positive in this conference, which is still going on. But the European Union seems to be stricken with all sorts of issues. It started with delivery issues, which almost had Ursula von der Leyen, the EC president, falling out with the authorities in Northern Ireland because she was about to revoke the Northern Ireland Protocol to stop doses going through from Ireland up north. It got that serious at one point, but that seems to have calmed down to an extent. But there's also this suspicion about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that they're having trouble persuading people to take. So they're turning to the big companies to say, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do in the future? And most of them are trying, as you'll hear now, to sound as positive as they can about it.
The numbers we are producing today are far from indicative of what we can produce in the future. We expect that the additional capacity investment, which we announced yesterday, to drive to up to 1.4 billion doses in 2022 will be helpful.
The hallmark of our technology platform is that our manufacturing processes are easily adaptable to producing updated versions of the coronavirus spike protein that match the new strains. We initiated development of new formulations against the emerging strains in early January of this year, and we are already testing them in preclinical studies. The company plans to begin clinical testing of these new vaccine candidates in the second quarter of this year.
Andrew, let's throw this forward. Is the EU ever going to get over its vaccination issues?
Well, you heard from those two interviews just there that the vaccine companies are already started to talk long term about what they can do now and then what they can do in the future. The EU, first of all, has to get rid of this vaccine shyness problem that it has across the European bloc now, sparked off by these public suspicions about the efficacy of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, but also something running deeper within the European culture in various places that they're simply nervous of getting vaccination. So they have to deal with that. And the European Union has said in Brussels, we're going to start a bigger dialogue with the different populations of the different countries to try and get some more trust built up. But they've also announced what they're calling the Hera Incubator scheme, which is a looking ahead scheme, 75 million euros pledged towards better testing, better genomic testing of variants to see what's coming down the pike in the future, and a closer look at how that spreads through different populations, and a look again at the supply chain process and how they can't start smoothing that out to make sure that there are more vaccines readily available and able to be adapted in the future should they need them. So they're dealing with two demons at the moment. One, to persuade people in Europe at the moment to take the vaccine, and secondly, to make sure they're ready to deal with this should it happen again, because they're that spooked, of course, by what's happening at the moment.
Thinking long term. Andrew Wilson, thank you for the update.
Well, this all comes as European Union leaders urge member countries to think twice about rolling back lockdown restrictions. Infections remain high across the EU, and there are growing concerns about COVID variants. Let's talk to our correspondent, Tony Waterman, in Brussels for us. Tony, good to see you. Vaccines are obviously a hugely important part of getting the world out of the pandemic, but the EU still seems to be struggling with rollout.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. As Andrew was just talking about there, it's been hit by a number of different issues. There were supply glitches at some of the manufacturing sites. This led to delivery delays. And there's also been, in certain member states, just very slow uptake in these deliveries. Some of the member states didn't get their vaccination programs off the ground until January, even though the vaccines started being rolled out at the end of December. So that has put Europe very much behind the curve. Just over 4% of the population has now received at least one jab. That compares to over 27% in the UK and just about 14% in the United States. So this is something that needs to be dealt with. The good news is that more vaccines are on the way. We're expecting deliveries to triple in the second quarter of this year, up to 300 million doses. That's only taking into account the 3 approved vaccines at the moment: Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is currently under evaluation by the European Medicines Agency, so we could even have a 4th, perhaps even a 5th, if the Novavax one hits the market in the second quarter. So that is the good news. There could be a turning of the tide there. But as Andrew was talking about, they need to do a better job. Officials, leaders need to do a better job at convincing people to get this vaccine. The AstraZeneca jab in particular has been hit with a crisis of confidence after a number of member states said that they wouldn't be using it for people over 65 because there just wasn't enough information on its efficacy in that age group. You had the president of France questioning how effective it was out in public, and this has undermined a lot of confidence in these vaccines. You have health workers who aren't taking the jabs yet, so the top priority is ramping up this production, being prepared for these variants, but also doing a campaign, a PR campaign to convince people to take these jabs when they are available.
The optics are obviously very important. The pictures going around the EU that the EU is seen to be doing something. What else do they hope to achieve from the summit?
Well, the top thing on their agenda is figuring out a way to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And that is the thing that they've been discussing so far in this meeting today. Another thing that they're going to be talking about is ramping up production. The Commission really wants these leaders to adopt the Hera Incubator that we heard about earlier, basically throwing more money into research behind these mutant variants because there are these concerns that they could render the current stable of vaccines less effective. They're also going to be talking about border restrictions. The Commission really wants member states to stick to its recommendations, and we've seen some of them stepping out of queue. Belgium, Germany, Hungary, for example, are imposed travel bans in and out to varying degrees in and out of their countries. They're also going to be discussing the possibility of a vaccine passport, but that is not going to be adopted today, and much to the chagrin of a lot of these tourism-dependent economies like Greece, which in fact earlier this week just released its own form of a digital coronavirus passport, a certificate, really desperate to get these economies reopened as we head into the very lucrative summer season. So these are the top things on the agenda as these leaders are meeting virtually today.
Tony, I was looking at some German newspapers who've been putting the boot into the EU on its slow vaccine rollout compared to the UK's rather more speedy vaccine rollout. I wonder how damaging this whole episode has been to the EU's reputation for competence.
Yeah, I think this has damaged that reputation just a little bit. And don't forget, the UK is now not part of the EU anymore and has pointed that out, kind of cheerleading a little bit that it has been able to have these very impressive numbers when it comes to first dose immunizations. Europe has taken a different approach, though, don't forget, because Europe is not just doing one jab and then waiting, 12 weeks for the second one. They are sticking to the guidelines that have been given by the vaccine makers themselves, whether it's a 3-week point or it's a 4-week later for that second jab. So that has somewhat put them behind the curve, but they are very much dealing with the optics of looking like they just cannot get their act together. And certainly the Commission and the Commission president has faced a lot of criticism from the member states. The interesting thing going forward is going to be, as we get these 300 million jabs delivered in the second quarter, are the member states themselves going to have the expanded capacity to keep up with this influx? They've been complaining that there's been a scarcity of these jabs, but now that they're going to be flooded with them, are they going to know what to do with them?
Tony, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Tony Waterman there from Brussels.
The Spanish capital, Madrid, has started to vaccinate teachers and people aged over 80 who don't live in care homes. That will involve administering 130,000 doses, 50,000 just over the next 5 days. Meanwhile, thousands of frontline workers are being vaccinated at a location normally used for mass events of a different kind. Rahul Pathak reports.
The Wanda Metropolitano Stadium, the home of La Liga side Atletico Madrid. It's also now front and centre in Spain's battle against COVID-19 after being repurposed as a mass vaccination centre.
Now, the people here are lining up to have the AstraZeneca jab, and many are key frontline workers such as police, school teachers and those working for the emergency services. And it's hoped that this stadium will allow the health authorities to vaccinate up to 10,000 people a day.
We do feel safer because we hope this can end the problem. I think everybody should get vaccinated.
Right now, this is the most important weapon we have. We don't know when this will end, but we know that with this strategy, we can prevent a lot more infections. For us, we now have a means to an end.
The Wanda Metropolitano has in the past hosted Champions League finals. Its current role just as high profile and arguably much more important.
We will work dose by dose to get everybody vaccinated as soon as possible. Every single group and every person is important. In order to do that, we need more doses. This is how we measure the success or failure of this fight against COVID.
Spain's original target was to vaccinate 70% of its population by the summer. At the current rate, it's unlikely to meet that. However, mass vaccination centres like the Wanda will certainly help. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, dark days ahead. GetLink, the company that owns and operates the Channel Tunnel, reports a huge net loss.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Quick reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and on the CGTN app.
The global chip shortage has hit Japanese car makers hard. Silicon for microchips is in short supply after global lockdowns led to a surge in sales of consumer electronics. Automakers around the world have been affected, but it's particularly bad in Japan. Overall production for 2020 was down just over 4.5%, but Subaru says production fell over 29%. Australia has passed a new law that will force tech companies, including Google and Facebook, to pay for news content. The country's parliament passed all final amendments to the so-called News Media Bargaining Code. The US tech giants fiercely opposed the new law. Facebook even temporarily removed access to all news content in the country on its platform in opposition to the legislation. GameStop shares surged again, this time in Frankfurt. One of the computer game retailer's board members tweeted a photo of an ice cream cone and a frog emoji. Moments later, the company's stock value almost doubled. Ryan Cohen was appointed to GameStop's board at the start of the year to turn the company around. He's been posting cryptic tweets in the last few weeks. The boss of investment bank Goldman Sachs says working from home isn't the new normal, calling it an aberration. David Solomon says the investment bank operated throughout 2020 with fewer than 10% of the normal levels of office staff. He said he worries for some 3,000 new employees who would not get the mentorship which new staff, particularly the young, need. Shares in Hong Kong's stock market operator tumbled as the city raised the stamp duty on stock trades for the first time in almost 30 years. Shares fell 12.3%, later trimming losses to around 8.8%. Higher duties make it costlier to trade, which raises investor concerns about Hong Kong's long-term financial status.
Getlink, the company that owns and operates the Channel Tunnel, says its profits for 2020 plunged 67% from the year before because of the pandemic. Ross Cullen is in Paris.
Getlink, which changed its name from Eurotunnel in 2017, posted a consolidated net loss of $137 million for the 2020 financial year. The firm operates the Channel Tunnel, the undersea link between southern England and northern France. It runs a railway shuttle between Folkestone and Calais, carrying passengers in cars and vans, with a separate freight shuttle for trucks. And while the group said it's confident in the future, it decided to postpone its 2021 financial outlook, saying there wasn't enough visibility around the health crisis and the associated travel restrictions. Train traffic continues to be hit by both the pandemic and Brexit, with cars and motorbikes that use the shuttle trains dropping off 71% last month compared to January 2020. Now, Getlink says there are three factors that are contributing to this declining market for freight and passenger traffic: stockpiling before the Brexit deal was signed in December, adjustments to the new post-Brexit border requirements, and the French and British travel restrictions that are linked to the pandemic. Eurostar is Getlink's biggest customer, with its high-speed passenger services between the UK and France, Belgium and the Netherlands. But the passenger market continues to be severely affected by the travel restrictions, and here at Gare du Nord there is only one Eurostar train a day running from Paris to London, and only one train running from London to Paris. Eurostar itself, which is majority owned by the French state, warned in January that it's in a very critical condition and could run out of cash by the summer. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
We're all going on a summer holiday. At least Brits hope so. Holiday firms have reported a surge in bookings. UK residents who've endured 3 lockdowns were quick to jump on board after the government announced its plans for easing restrictions. Alan French, the CEO of Thomas Cook, says the possible return of international travel in May is more than welcome.
The news on Monday was fantastic news. Everybody's absolutely itching to start planning the summer holidays. And we saw a huge level of interest coming onto the site as a result of that. I think coming on from that starts to become, well, when is it going to be safe? And I think that most people have come to the conclusion that later this summer is going to be safer than earlier this summer. So we've seen a lot of bookings, particularly in Europe, for later in the summer. And then we've seen some bookings perhaps later on in the year for more exotic destinations like the US and Dubai. We're obviously thinking through, well, what does it mean in terms of how can we safely get people to those destinations and get them back again in as hassle-free a way as is possible. And I think that requires a level of coordination between government bodies on the, the departure end and the arrival end. And that's what we're expecting to see as an output from the work that we're expecting on the 12th of April.
But let's talk about the business, because you knew when you took the helm that the company and the travel sector in general were really due a shake-up. But the pandemic and the fallout, I mean, how have you handled it all?
It has been a very up and down period of time since we launched. I mean, clearly when we launched, we didn't realise exactly what was going to happen. We did launch in the middle of a pandemic, so we launched with a very slim team, and we made sure that we controlled that aspect of the business heavily, while making sure that we also offered customers holidays that were suitable to the time. And that meant in September offering them holidays that were only on the government corridors, proactively working to offer alternative bookings if those destinations went off sale, and when they did go off sale and we couldn't find an alternative holiday for customers, making sure that we could rebook them.
Alan, I was hoping to get a feel of how you, as the CEO of a travel company in this pandemic, was dealing with it, handling with it. If at times you thought, oh, yikes, the wrong place, wrong time.
I think that thought process came and went a long time ago. I think if you're going to launch a travel business in the middle of a pandemic, you're going to be pretty robust, and you've got to be prepared for pretty much everything. And I think it's fair to say in the 6 months that we've been trading, we've seen almost everything in terms of rocketing demand, and then we've seen governments restricting our sales processes. We've seen countries come on sale, go off sale, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes expectedly. So it's really been a roller coaster ride. Not unexpected, been a great deal of fun. Working with companies like Fosun, who've been backing us on this, who've got a lot of travel expertise, has been really helpful. But yes, without a doubt, there's been a few challenges on the way.
You talk about this roller coaster ride. So where is the company at, and indeed where's the industry at in terms of recovery and getting back to normal?
I think we're a long way from normal. I think the government announcing its roadmap on Monday was very helpful in starting the recovery process. But the recovery process is therefore only 3 days old. So, we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of things that could be thrown at us in that period of time. I do think with the vaccination program, though, we can see light at the end of the tunnel. We're pretty confident that the holiday business is going to be back. We're pretty confident it's going to be back this summer. The exact timing and the exact mechanism of that yet to be played through. But, we can see our European partners in destinations carrying on with vaccination programs, making sure that the destinations and the hotels are all set up well to cope with any kind of COVID-friendly processes in terms of hygiene and health. So I think we are starting to see an opening up of the business. We're starting to get confidence back. There's a real buoyancy and optimism in the business and in the industry in general that's really fun to be part of and great to see.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, China celebrates lifting millions of people out of absolute poverty. But who defines what poverty really means?
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time, because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first 2 epicenters in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, Ricky, loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is cut, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliet Mann. Our top stories: the EU's COVID vaccine rollout is lagging behind, and European lawmakers want answers from big pharma's bosses. Well, the Swiss pharmaceutical giant Roche has been at the forefront in meeting demand for diagnostic tests during the coronavirus pandemic. The company has produced millions of PCR and antibody tests worldwide. It's a very great pleasure to be able to talk to the Chief Executive, Bill Anderson. Bill, lovely to have your company. Welcome to the show. For companies like yours, treatments and vaccines in this age of coronavirus are progressing at the most staggering speed, months in development rather than years. This really is a golden age for science, medicine, and big pharma companies like yours, isn't it?
Well, I think we're just really pleased to have an opportunity to serve the world at a time like this. And I think I speak for many people who've spent a career in life sciences. We just feel like we're so privileged to have an opportunity to help. And so, it's been a remarkable 12 months.
Sadly, only a fraction of humanity receives the best health care. You're a commercial company. Profits matter. How do you stop this global lottery on healthcare and access to pharmaceutical treatment?
Well, we're really focused on ensuring that our therapies are available in every country in the world. And I'm really proud of our record on that. Over the last 2 decades, it's been an increasing focus. We use, for example, something we call international differential pricing. We sell our cancer therapies, for example, in every country in the world, and the price very much reflects the GDP in those countries. So we work, and not just, by the way, on pricing the medicines, but working with authorities to make sure that cancer treatment's available, that access to cancer diagnostics is there, and I'd say it's a win-win situation for the world where we can bring these medicines to everyone.
I've been reading your speech, and in it you're advocating a fundamental shift in healthcare around the world, from treating disease to caring for people. For those of us who are non-medical and not pharmaceutical, what does that mean exactly?
Well, we're the leading diagnostic company in the world, and we also are one of the leading pharmaceutical companies in the world. And we believe that the best care is one that's centered around a patient And it's not just a question of there being lots of great technologies or medicines or diagnostics, but how does that all come together so that the right patient gets the right medicine at the right time? And we've been a leader of this in cancer. So increasingly now our therapies are given only to particular patients who have a molecular diagnosis or a genomic fingerprint that says that they're going to respond to this therapy. And there's no point giving that therapy to patients who don't have that fingerprint. So that's been something we started, we really pioneered on this starting in the late 90s, but now we have a number of medicines that are given that way. We also have a company called Foundation Medicine that does genomic profiling of tumors so that each patient gets sort of a custom approach to their therapy and the best possible therapy.
Data and technology are obviously, presumably, vital to this vision, this strategy of yours, and not everyone is going to be happy with sharing private data about their private health. And that's a huge roadblock, at least for your strategy, isn't it?
You know, it's been a challenge, but I think what's really encouraging is there's increasing use of technologies that can depersonalize the data so that you have sort of patient records and you have information and data on the disease, on the therapies, on the outcomes, but they're not linked to that person. So that using this sort of de-identified, depersonalized data, we can improve care. We can use that to help find new medicines, but we do that all in a way that really protects the privacy of patients.
The experience of the United States and watching the story of Obamacare and for us Brits, the National Health Service in the UK, show that trying to reform healthcare, at least at a national level, is a pretty hard road that is not always popular.
Yeah, I think healthcare is an enormous field and it's enormously complex. And so reform and progress does not come overnight. But I think you mentioned the Affordable Care Act in the U.S., so-called Obamacare. One of the things that was embedded in that legislation was a requirement that every patient needed to have an electronic health record. And that one act has been a massive change in the availability to systematize care, to make sure that patients don't get the wrong therapies just because of an accident. And also so that data in a way that's protected for privacy can be used to develop new therapies to better understand the science of diseases. So I think the progress is being made. It's not always as fast as we would like, but I think COVID has been a great example of how we can really accelerate progress.
Bill, one last and very quick question. You've been tied up all day doing other things, I'm sure, so you haven't probably been watching EU lawmakers and the big pharma bosses meeting today, and it reported in some quarters that EU lawmakers are calling to account big pharma bosses. Are you comfortable with politicians scapegoating, as it might be reported, big pharmaceutical companies?
Well, I think it's important for us to remember that a year ago, when this crisis was breaking, we were all hoping that maybe, just maybe, there would be a vaccine within 18 to 24 months. In fact, there have been now hundreds of millions of doses produced and delivered to patients in Europe and around the world. So, I think we've got to keep our eye on that. I know, again, we all want vaccines faster. Believe me, I want a vaccine. My family wants a vaccine. We're waiting too. But, I think they're coming. We're going to get there. And I think it's a real triumph for the life science industry that we're able to deliver so fast.
Bill Anderson, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme.
Thanks, Jamie.
President Xi Jinping has hailed China's achievements in poverty eradication at a ceremony in Beijing. China has invested $248 billion over the past 8 years. Now, Beijing says current policies will continue as it transitions to what it calls rural revitalization. Now, those policies include ensuring food and clothing supplies to those areas, building more schools, increased medical access, and job creation and relocation schemes. Now, China sets its current poverty threshold at $620 per year. That's $1.69 a day. Now, the World Bank and the United Nations threshold is a little bit higher at $693 a year. But China says its benchmark cannot be defined by income alone, and that factors like purchasing power and a large urban-rural price gap mean its standard is actually around $2.25 a day in real terms. Well, President Xi Jinping has been speaking about the Chinese government's poverty alleviation. Our reporter Su Yuhing has the story.
Expressing thanks to all the role models who contributed to China's victory against extreme poverty. That was the message from President Xi Jinping, who presented awards and certificates to national honorary recipients in Beijing on Thursday. Those honored come from diverse backgrounds, from a 98-year-old researcher to young grassroots-level officials. President Xi Jinping hailed the country's achievements in eradicating extreme poverty, calling it a miracle of history. He said China's accomplishments also set a pioneering example for the international community.
We have created a China model for poverty reduction, and we've made great contributions to global poverty reduction. Based on the current poverty standard, 770 million rural people have been lifted out of poverty in China since reform and opening up began. And according to the international poverty line set by the World Bank, China accounted for 70% of the world's total, which were lifted out of poverty. China achieved the poverty reduction goal set by the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 10 years ahead of the deadline.
President Xi Jinping first raised the concept of targeted poverty alleviation in 2013. Over the past 8 years, nearly 100 million impoverished rural residents living below the current poverty line have managed to escape extreme poverty. More than 800 counties have been removed from the poverty list. Despite the challenges of COVID-19 through 2020, China also succeeded in lifting the remaining 52 counties out of poverty. These were mostly in remote areas in southwestern and western China.
For China, eradicating extreme poverty has been a major success, but the battle isn't over yet. President Xi Jinping has said, and I quote, "Being lifted out of poverty is not an end in itself, but a starting point for a new life." Su Yuting, CGTN, reporting from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
Well, Alfred Mulan Wu is Assistant Dean and Associate Professor at National University of Singapore. I asked him just how significant China's poverty relief efforts really are.
I think the Chinese government has done a great job in terms of fighting poverty. Because of the Chinese government mobilized a lot of resources to lift poor people out of poverty. They has introduced a lot of different mechanisms to achieve anti-poverty goal. For example, the Chinese government mobilized a state-owned enterprise to help some poor regions. Chinese government also required rich provinces to help poor provinces. In the meantime, they also asked local public officials to put tremendous efforts on poverty reduction, and the local public officials work very hard to achieve the goal.
Poverty is a relative term, isn't it? Poverty means different things to different people. China defines extreme poverty to $1.69 a day at current exchange rates, compared to the World Bank's global threshold, which is $1.90. It means different things in different parts of the world, doesn't it?
Yes, poverty reduction is very much context specific. So it means that local people can define their own definition. I mean, international organization never actually require that every country should adopt same standard of poverty reduction line. So I think Chinese government has a legitimate reason to define their own absolute poverty line.
The World Bank has been supporting China's development and reform efforts since 1980. CGTN's Michael Wang spoke to the World Bank's country director for China.
One of the big things that happened in the early 2000s is that China started building up a database of, I think, close to 150,000 villages, which they determined to be, poverty-stricken villages and counties. And then policy was directed to help those particular places. I think China clearly demonstrates that economic growth, and in particular the kind of economic growth that China was able to generate, is the key contributor to poverty reduction. In the first 3 decades, by far the largest contribution to poverty reduction came from economic growth, not from any particularly targeted social policies. It's only in the last decade, and particularly after 2013, that we find that policy really tries to go to the last mile.
China's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva says COVID-19 has sharpened the focus on global inequality. He's been talking to CGTN Zhang Nini.
Global inequality is exacerbated, North-South gap is widening, and the implementation of the right of development is faced with new challenges. Actually, in some Western countries, racial discrimination and xenophobia are aggravating, and disinformation and hate speech are spreading. Certain countries are obsessed with politicizing the virus and smearing others. The legitimate demand by developing countries for vaccines is not getting adequate attention. We sincerely hope that the multilateral human rights bodies will focus more on issues such as development, equality, and people's livelihood.
US regulators have found the single-shot Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine is safe and effective. It paves the way for it to become the third COVID-19 vaccine to be authorized in the United States, possibly within days. The company has agreed to provide the US with 100 million doses by the end of June. And China has approved 2 new COVID-19 vaccines for public use. The 2 shots are developed by vaccine company CanSino Biologics and Sinopharm's Wuhan affiliate. They've shown efficacy rates of up to 95% and 72% respectively. The new approvals mean China now has 4 locally developed approved vaccines.
Hungary is expecting coronavirus infections to rise in the next 2 weeks and will extend a partial lockdown until the 15th of March. People have begun receiving Sinopharm's COVID vaccine, the first EU residents to do so. The rollout got underway this week after the country's regulators approved the jab. Julia Chapman reports now from Budapest.
As Hungary battles a rising tide of COVID-19 cases, its vaccine campaign has reached a new milestone. These are some of the first Chinese vaccines to be used in the European Union. Each doctor's office received between 50 and 55 doses of Sinopharm's jab this week.
You can read all kinds of information in the media, pros and cons. But finally, our doctor has explained to us how it works and explained that no harm could be done. So let's get on with it as soon as possible.
Hungarian officials have criticized the EU's slow vaccine rollout, so the country turned to Russia and China for extra supplies.
Sinopharm's vaccine is the 5th on offer in Hungary after the approval of Russia's Sputnik V. Which vaccine you get depends on your age and health status, but up to a quarter of Hungarians are set to receive the Chinese jab.
Polls suggest that Hungarians would prefer other vaccines over Sinopharm's, but doctors are urging their patients to take the jab.
Doctors had concerns about the Chinese vaccine as we don't know the results of phase 3 trials, but at the same time, doctors have consulted with virologists and their opinion was, even without knowing the efficacy of the vaccine, the most important thing is to inoculate this age group as soon as possible, as we know that to use any vaccine gives better security than using no vaccine.
Some 5 million doses from Sinopharm are expected in Hungary by the end of May. And Prime Minister Viktor Orban says he could get the jab as early as next week. Julia Chapman, CGTN, Dunavarshani.
A support system is crucial when recovering from a serious illness. With visitors restricted at some hospitals, one in China has developed a groundbreaking solution to keep patients and their families in touch. Tao Yuan reports.
60-year-old Kang Jian visits his son in the ICU of West China Hospital, virtually through a 5G plus VR system. His son's legs are seriously injured in a car accident.
I can just turn my head to wherever I want to look. If I turn around this way, I get to see his leg. It's as if I was there.
Since last year's COVID-19 outbreak, hospitals have placed restrictions on visitors for epidemic control purposes. But doctors believe that family support is essential to patient recovery, so they turn to technology for a solution.
VR technology is now very mature, and 5G technology is very fast. There's no delay. So I thought we could use these technologies for ICU visits.
Hu Chenggong is an associate professor at West China Hospital's critical care department. He worked with a tech company in southern China to develop the technology.
The navigation system installed in the robot can remember its path, so it walks automatically. The videos captured by each of these cameras offer an immersive experience.
Unlike traditional video chatting, the VR technology provides a 360-degree panoramic view.
For people who don't know about intensive care, the ICU can be a very scary place. The patients are all on the verge of death. The machines can be intimidating for the patients. Through this kind of technology, we hope patients can feel as though their family members are with them and give them confidence to fight the disease.
Hu Chenggong now wants to expand the use of this technology. As the best hospital in southwest China, West China Hospital works with many small medical facilities in the region.
They might be very remote and lack good medical resources and experienced doctors, but we can realize telemedicine through this kind of technology. It's as though I was standing right there.
Hu Chenggong says if that comes true, many more lives will have another chance. Taoyuan CGTN, Chengdu.
Armenia's Prime Minister says the military has attempted a coup. This comes after top military leaders called on Nikol Pashinyan to resign. The army is angry about the sacking of top military commanders. Pashinyan has been protesting in the capital with supporters, while the opposition staged a rival demonstration. Finland will go into a 3-week lockdown from the 8th of March as the country deals with a surge in COVID-19. The new rules will include the closure of bars and restaurants, but the government has said there will be no curfew. The Prime Minister says the measures currently in force are no longer sufficient and blamed the rapid spread of the virus on the variant first identified in the UK. Cocaine with a street value of $1.5 billion has been seized in Hamburg in Germany. The record-breaking haul follows another record-breaking seizure of heroin on Tuesday. 23 tons of cocaine was destined for the Netherlands. Police from Antwerp and Germany took part in the raid. The United States is expected to announce that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved and likely ordered the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The journalist was brutally killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. The Crown Prince has denied any involvement, and Saudi authorities say his death was the result of a rogue operation by a team of their agents. Facebook has banned all remaining accounts linked to the Myanmar military. The move applies to the army and entities controlled by the armed forces on both Facebook and Instagram. The social media platform said it made the decision because of the use of deadly force against protesters who are demanding the release of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi.
Ghana has become the first country to receive coronavirus vaccines from COVAX, the UN-led initiative to ensure equitable distribution of vaccines. Li-Ling Tang reports.
The Emirates Sky cargo plane touched down Wednesday morning in the Ghanaian capital of Accra, carrying long-awaited precious cargo from Mumbai.
We're really happy because they're going to benefit a large number of beneficiaries in Ghana.
Being unloaded are 600,000 doses of Oxford AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines, acquired and delivered by UNICEF for the largest vaccine supply, procurement and distribution endeavour in history. But getting this shipment here was anything but direct.
It happened that the day that everything lined up, we didn't have any availability on flights. And one of the air carriers that we were in discussions with said that they would divert a plane actually from Shanghai to Mumbai to pick up the vaccine doses, take them on to Dubai, where then the doses were actually bundled with the injection equipment, the safety boxes, syringes, and then fly them on to Accra. So this is maybe like one flight gives you a microcosm of the logistical challenges.
The vaccines in this first tranche were manufactured under license by the Serum Institute of India, one of many crucial partners in an effort to deliver at least 2 billion doses to low and middle income countries by the end of 2021. More than half of those doses slated for poorer nations at no cost to their governments.
This is a global pandemic and one that knows no borders, and certainly leaving behind the global south, those countries that haven't been able to access vaccines on their own, actually leaves everyone exposed because we live in an interconnected world.
Conceived early in the pandemic, the COVAX facility joins forces between major global health organizations and UN agencies and more than 190 participating countries and regions. The Biden administration this month officially signed on to COVAX and has committed $4 billion. It's a welcomed addition to an effort that already appears to be going full steam, with 20 more vaccine shipments scheduled over the next 10 days. The next stop on the COVAX vaccines itinerary, Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, on Friday. Li-Ling Tan, CGTN, New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, vaccinating a population of 10 million people. The United Arab Emirates receives more shipments of doses.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The United Arab Emirates is vaccinating its population of nearly 10 million people. Without its own vaccine, it's relying on imports. Jacob Greaves reports from Dubai.
Wheels down, and with it the arrival of the latest batch of COVID-19 vaccines. Over 5 million doses of vaccines have now been administered in the UAE, according to health officials. Those being unloaded here are from Pfizer-BioNTech. They need to be kept at a temperature of minus 70 degrees Celsius, which in Dubai presents a problem. The summer temperatures reached here in this desert climate make these mobile refrigeration units essential to safely transport vaccines from the tarmac to the terminal.
These can be set at a specific temperature, and so we set those either generally between 2 to 8 or 15 to 25. Those are the two temperature ranges all pharmaceuticals move in. And so if it's vaccines, for example, generally they move in 5 degrees, so we'll set these at 5, and then they'll be kept at that temperature to make sure they're kept out of the elements.
The UAE has authorised the use of 4 vaccines in total. Abu Dhabi has largely been reliant on China's Sinopharm vaccine, recently adding Russia's Sputnik V, whilst Dubai has also used AstraZeneca and Pfizer-BioNTech doses. This room is climate controlled at between 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. That means the insulation inside these boxes is critical to keeping the vaccines at a healthy temperature. Some of them, with insulation, are capable of maintaining a temperature of minus 80 degrees Celsius for up to 10 days. That requires dry ice or gel solutions, but the heat isn't the only issue for transporting vaccines.
Obviously, it can be a challenge if you are working in a hot environment, but let me be very clear, it's not only a hot environment which is challenging, also a freezing environment can be challenging.
After initially allowing anyone to take the Sinopharm vaccine, facing a surge in cases, the UAE has started prioritising its use for the elderly and vulnerable. But Dubai has also signed up to the WHO-led COVAX scheme to help deliver doses to developing nations. The Emirates recently pledged to help transport and deliver 2 billion worldwide in 2021. In poorer countries without sufficient infrastructure, that presents transport issues.
When you're talking about the different types of solutions, you might have a solution that requires dry ice. A destination, they might not have dry ice, okay? You might have a solution where you can plug it into electricity, but then at the airport, you might not have that infrastructure as well. So you'd have to use a type of equipment where you can use gel packs, but the key is to make sure they're loaded at the right time, they're transported at the right time, and also you don't transport too many.
Dubai might be taking stock of its latest batch of doses, but plenty of challenges remain to ensure poorer countries aren't left behind in the race to vaccinate populations. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
Brisbane has been named as the preferred bidder to host the 2032 Olympic Games. Greg Navarro has the story.
The last time Australia hosted an Olympic Games was here in Sydney in 2000, and now it appears it's Southern Queensland's turn. The International Olympic Committee has confirmed that the city of Brisbane has received preferred bid status. That means that essentially it's the only one out of several cities to move on to the next phase to begin talks to be the host city for the 2032 Olympics. And while it is by no means a done deal, there is still a lot of time left. Queensland officials say it looks pretty good.
We already have 85% of the venues at the moment. It's a new norm, which means it's a game changer. We don't have to build huge stadiums that are not going to be used in the future. And this gives us hope and opportunity as we go through our economic recovery and plan for the future. It gives every single one of us hope that it puts Brisbane firmly on that international map.
Now, several countries had initially expressed interest, including China and Germany. And barring any unforeseen bumps in the road, Brisbane could be named the official host of the 2032 Olympics as early as the Tokyo Olympics, at this point scheduled to take place in July. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Social media is making stars of the most unlikely people during lockdown, including this groovy grandmother from Germany, dubbed TikTok Nan. She's attracted over 125,000 followers with her online videos on keeping fit and active while in isolation. And her dance routines and lip syncing are proving a hit with the platform's mainly younger viewers. See more on europe.cgtn.com and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and Weibo.
The headlines again. The EU's COVID vaccine rollout is lagging behind, and European lawmakers want answers from big pharmaceutical bosses.
And China celebrates lifting 100 million people out of absolute poverty.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com and follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps like Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Coming up next on CGTN, Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, goodbye.